Hello there and welcome to the 20th episode of Career Stories Live. So today I'm joined by Daniel Chan, who's a director at PwC, charity trustee, watersports coach, school governor and much more. So welcome Daniel, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thanks, Sarah.
Nice to meet you. As always, please do comment to let us know that you're here, where you're joining from, and feel free to ask any questions or share your experience in the comments. So I can see that Jeff is already here. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining as usual. So Jeff's a former director at Ernst & Young. So thank you, Jeff. Okay, so the basis for the lives, I've really always just been interested in people's careers and why they do what they do. And my thought is really to inspire people about those things. And hopefully the guests that I have on each week will give a bit of advice and career tips. So that's the idea. So we'll start straight away with Dan. Could you just give us a brief intro into you and what it is you're doing right now?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Sarah, for the intro that you gave earlier as well. And it's great to see everybody here. So I'm Dan. I was born in Hong Kong, and then I grew up and spent most of my childhood on the Isle of Man before going to York, where I went to university to study history, and now based in London at PwC, where I joined as a graduate. As you say, I'm a director at PwC. I'm a chartered accountant and an auditor, which means that I look at financial information of different organizations and to make sure that what they say to people is complete and accurate from that perspective. But I also see myself as an independent sounding board for the organizations that I work with as well. And I think that's an important part of my role too. As you say, I specialize in working with charities. I'm really privileged and really proud to work with organizations that make a big difference in society and help those that need it as well. And then more widely, I love the water. I'm engaged in loads and loads of different water sports. I teach many of them, but also I enjoy just being at one with nature, actually, from that perspective, and that's what's driven me. You also mentioned that I hold some other positions. So I am a charity trustee of UK Youth, which is a national youth charity that links into kind of my passion for supporting young people. I'm a governor of the school I used to go to on the Isle of Man, and also a governor of a university, so the Royal Central School for Speech and Drama in the University of London as well. So that definitely keeps me busy. I'm really pleased to be here and share my journey.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I've got a couple of people joining. So John, so he's saying hi to both of us. So John's actually based in Chicago. So and Dan and I are both doing Chicago Marathon this year. So hoping that I can meet John in real life. So John came on my career stories on my second ever episode. So that's nice to see you, John. Thank you. And Paul is saying hi, Dan. How are you? So thank you for joining, Paul.
Fantastic.
Okay, so first thing, there's so much to talk about today, but the first thing is a bit about early careers. So did you have a job whilst you were at school? So maybe whilst you were in the Isle of Man or when you were at university? And if you did, has that kind of helped you in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first job that I can properly remember, certainly when I was paid a small amount of money for, was actually in a fish and chip shop. It was just after school, during kind of school holidays and that sort of thing. It was fascinating. I kind of went up from, I never did the cooking. I'm not very good at cooking, but I went up from doing the kind of taking the fish from the kind of the place and onto the kind of dishes, and then pouring the salt and vinegar, etc., and then slowly graduated up to doing the kind of taking the money and giving the change, etc. In those days, it was still very much cash rather than card. But what I learned from that was around customer service and also dealing with customers, complaints, and that sort of thing. And that I think is really important, because you want to navigate that carefully with customers. I also held a job in a shop in kind of retail, just as a shop assistant for a short while, and that again built on the kind of customer service aspect, which is very actually useful and relevant to my job now, which is around client service. So that's been helpful. Yeah. But then I was very fortunate, and with my love of the water, my first water sport properly was scuba diving.
Okay.
I progressed in my teenage years in kind of scuba diving, in instructor. And so, one of my jobs at university, very fortunately, was becoming a scuba diving instructor in Southeast Asia, and that again was fantastic experience and exposure to both different cultures, different ways of doing things, but also being able to impart knowledge and being able to articulate some quite complex things simply, and that's been again very helpful to me.
Amazing. That's a really good insight. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to your kind of career at PwC. So you said that you joined as a graduate. So how did that all come about? Were there lots of positions you applied for? Or?
No, to be honest, it's sort of an accident that I am doing what I'm doing now. I had never thought about accountancy as a career at university really until my final year, and my original plan was to continue studying history, and I was applying for masters and PhD programs in history, and actually had an offer to go and do that after my first degree. But I had a friend at the time at university who knew they wanted to do accountancy from the beginning, had applied, as you say, to all the roles in accountancy all around the world in all the major cities, London, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, etc. You name it, he applied for it. And one evening he just said to me, well, I've done all these applications. Why don't you try some too? Yeah. And so being a good friend, I did so. And I was fortunate enough to get an interview from a couple of firms, fortunate to get through a couple of firms, and PwC was the first firm to make me an offer. And I felt really fortunate about that. And it was a really difficult decision at the time. But I guess the logic in my mind at the time was, and I'm still somebody who wants to study. And actually during my first few years at PwC, I studied a master's part-time alongside the job. I'm really passionate about that. But I guess the thought pattern at the time was, if I want to study, I can always do that later on. But a firm like PwC may not always give me an offer, give me an opportunity. And so that's what I took. And so I joined PwC in 2011 in audit. And at the time, I didn't know what the word audit meant. But actually, it's been a really fantastic training experience, a way of understanding how business works and how organizations work. And it's led me to the path now where I'm being able to work with the organizations that I work with, so charities and organizations that are really kind of purpose-led and purpose-driven.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. So I can see Jeff's just asked a question about how did you decide a finance-related job was what you want to do. So I think you just kind of covered that really in that answer. But thank you very much, Jeff. So that's great. Okay, so you also do lots of voluntary work, so both as a charity trustee and a school governance. So you mentioned that in your intro. So just expand a bit more on why that's important to you, really, and what you get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would recommend everybody, if you aren't already a trustee and kind of a voluntary position, to look into that, because I think it adds a lot, both personally but also professionally. But in terms of me, I think I'm driven certainly by my values. And I think there's two particular things that kind of stand out to me when I reflect on when I have kind of felt the most passionate, when I have felt the most excited, when I have felt like I've been able to make the biggest difference. And that's in two respects. One is around feeling like I'm making a difference. And not just to myself, but to others. And then second of all is around a passion for developing others. And that's why I love the kind of water sports instruction. It's why I love sharing my passions with others effectively. And that's a lot about it as well. So with my trustee position, I think it's important to do a trusteeship of an organization that you care about and your passions align with their mission. And with UK Youth, I'm very passionate about supporting young people, and I'm also very passionate about kind of giving back from that perspective. And UK Youth is an organisation that lets me do that. With my school, there's clearly an emotional attachment. I had a great time at school, and I was very fortunate about that, and so it's a way for me to give back from that perspective. And in terms of the university, again, one of the things I did learn during my childhood was around speech and drama and the importance of the arts and creativity, and that interest, I guess, was what drew me to my kind of university governorship position as well. So I think it's all around making things that click happen, and if you find something that you are interested in, intrigued about, then it's around having the bravery to pursue it, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you got any advice for people on how they would go about finding charities that might suit them?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I guess self-reflection and self-awareness, what is important to you as a person, individual. There are some people who may have had family members affected by particular medical conditions, and those charities may resonate. For example, it might be people who have children and it's their children's schools, for example, that again could resonate. So it's finding out what's important to you. And then in terms of looking for those opportunities, there are adverts that get placed all around, so they're all over the internet. Positions are available in all the kind of common things. But even if they're not available, if there is a particular organization that you are interested in and think you have the skills and experience and perspectives to give back, then I would reach out to them and see, if not now, then maybe they can get back to you when there is a position that is open there. And a common misconception that many people have is, I need to be very senior, I need to have lots of experience, I need to have lots of different skills to become a trustee, and that's not always true. And I would say that more and more organizations are looking for a diverse range of perspectives to support them, and in addition to skills and experience and expertise, they're also looking for lived experience of the cause that the charity is looking for. So just because you may not have what you consider to be the right experience, don't assume that that's not what the organization is looking for as well.
Yeah. That's so true. And I know, so my son James, who you've met, he was actually a charity trustee at 19 for a watersports organization, sorry. And I think you're right, he obviously doesn't have the kind of the life experience, but he is a youth member, and this particular organization was looking for youth input. So actually it's really great to get that view directly from someone of the age group that they're looking to target. So never too young, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And one of my big things, and I seek to, I guess, put this voice out there into the charity sector more broadly, but I absolutely think age is not a barrier. In UK Youth, we like what you just said, Sarah, specifically recruit in some of our trustee recruitment young trustees, because we do want that perspective, and we think that perspective is important. I think we would be seen as out of touch if we didn't have that.
Absolutely. And what do you think about kind of the transference of voluntary work into being able to find employment in those areas? Do you think that's helpful as well?
Yeah, I think it helps both ways. Absolutely. Whatever you do as your employment definitely helps with voluntary aspects, but vice versa. I mean, there are things I've done in my voluntary positions that I would never have dreamed of doing in my day job, but certainly at the same point in that career at the time. So when I first became a trustee, and that was about 5 years ago now, I was more junior than I am now today. But one of the first things I did as a trustee was hire the chief operating officer for the charity, or be on the interview panel. So all I'd done up to that point in my career was be interviewed and not be the interviewer. And that was a fascinating experience, just to see how people react and see and be on the other side of the table to get that sort of exposure. There's also the elements around asking questions, and one of the, again, common misconceptions is you need to know all the answers as a trustee or as a non-executive, and that's not true. It's about asking questions, and often it's the questions that may sound silly to begin with that draw out the most important information for the organization and contribute to the ideas that can really propel the organization forward. So I absolutely agree, there's plenty to learn, and it's also about the relationships you build as well, and the network that you build into it. And I've met so many interesting people as a trustee. I've met youth workers up and down the country who are so inspiring with what they do day in, day out. And I think those connections will stick with you if you invest in them as well.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. And you mentioned non-exec director there as well. So I have a few clients that are kind of doing charity trustee work because it's an organisation they're interested in, but actually they're thinking then that might lead on to non-exec director positions at some point. So do you think that they are transferable? Do you think it's similar skills?
I think the skill sets are very similar, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because charity trustees are non-executive directors often.
Yeah.
A number of charities are also registered companies.
Yes.
And so formally, I am a non-executive director of the charity as well. So there are definitely common skill sets. There are probably additional considerations in a paid executive position. But I would absolutely say that many of the skills and experiences are transferable.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so everyone that's been on so far has talked about their values in some way, and I think you've really already referenced this. But do your personal values have an impact on the type of organisation or role that you're going to take on?
Absolutely. I don't think I could work with or for an organisation that didn't have values that I agreed with or subscribed to, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think most organizations now recognize the importance of having a set of values, but I think it's whether organizations walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Yes.
I think it's the actions of an organization that really make the biggest difference. And often we see that come out in times of challenge, in times of adversity. So one of the things that I was particularly proud, I guess, of working at PwC is over the pandemic, the firm, PwC, made a commitment early on that actually we would protect everybody's jobs and during the time. And that was certainly true in the UK here and in the UK firm. And I was really proud, I guess, to work for an organization that prioritized people and took that worry, I guess, off people altogether to begin with. From a personal perspective, I mean, I've needed to take some time off during my career, and the firm has been very supportive of that. There was kind of almost no questions asked in that time, and all there was care and support as well. And if we really step back, I mean, organizations, we think of companies as kind of these big giants potentially, or even smaller companies perhaps, but at the end of the day, it's around people. We're all people, and it's interacting with different other humans, and the humanity, I think, of an organization is really important.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think particularly about how the organisation was and is with its people, because I think from an external perspective, you think that kind of management accountancy firms are quite hard and, you know, hire and fire and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really nice to hear that that's not actually the case. Really good. Yeah, and I think going back to your point about identifying companies that are walking the talk with the values, LinkedIn are just rolling out something new on the job search where you can actually search by what they're calling is commitment, which essentially is values. So you can search for a particular organisation, industry, and then their values. I think that's a really interesting move. And organisations, what they have to do is upload what their commitments are, but then also they have to prove evidence. So they can't just say, you know, we're great at this. They have to prove that. So I think that's a really, really interesting move that they're prioritising values in that way. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Okay, so a little bit more about the water sports coaching then. So you talked a bit about, you know, why you progressed that route. But before we were talking offline, you were talking about how it's really important to you to kind of qualify other people as coaches. So do you want to expand a bit more on that aspect?
Yeah, so I guess I'm in a fortunate position where I don't just, I guess, coach people to do water sports. I coach people to coach water sports, and you're a brilliant example of that, I guess, Sarah. And congratulations again. But I guess for me, it's around the freedom of the water. I mentioned earlier around connecting with nature, but it's also my way of seeing the world, of adventuring, of exploring, of relaxing, actually. And I find the water a really calming place, and that's why I love it, and that's why I want to share my love of it with others, and that's why I want others to be able to share their love of it with others as well. And that's kind of common theme. So I do a range of water sports. So I mentioned scuba diving earlier. I also coach kayaking, canoeing, stand-up paddleboarding. I instruct in windsurfing and powerboating, and I sail recreationally. So it's a range of different water sports. But at the end of the day, I think it is around kind of what's important to you and to me. And I see water sports as a way for people to really get out there, really gain confidence in a way that they might not otherwise do. There are some people who don't particularly like team sports, for example, and this isn't by all means everybody, but there are some people that don't particularly like team sports, which is often what's played in school, and actually they find themselves in a more individualized activity such as some of these water sports. There's also in some of these water sports not that competitive element. I know there are races and that sort of thing in a number of water sports, but there's also a friendly community out there for people who just want to enjoy the social independent aspect of water sports, which I also love.
Yeah, brilliant. So I've just seen a comment come through from John. So he's saying, I absolutely love that a career discussion with someone at one of the largest consulting firms on the planet is mostly about values, coaching and volunteering. So yeah, exactly, John. That's exactly why I wanted Dan to come on. So we met, as Dan's just kind of alluded to, when he was teaching me and my sons and my friend Claire to become paddleboard coaches. So that's how we met. And yeah, we talked a lot about volunteering during those sessions, and I think even the during that whole thing, I think it taught James and Harry a lot. So my children that are 21 and 17, all about kind of learning in general and how people learn and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not just the actual sport, is it? It's the human learning behind it as well.
Absolutely, and it's understanding how we learn. And I've always said it's not about what we do; it's also about the how and the why. And that, I think, is an important lesson that hopefully they will take forward for the rest of their lives. And I think that's really powerful.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Okay, so I mean, it sounds like almost everything's been a high from an outside point of view. But what would you say have been your real career highs so far, Dan?
I guess there are some personal accomplishments that have been particularly important to me, I guess. So, I mean, I was nominated to what's known as the SORP committee in the charity sector, so the body that looks at designing the accounting standards for the charities in the UK and Republic of Ireland. I'm a member of the ICAW's Institute of Chartered Accountants England Wales's charity committee, which I now chair. These are all great things, but actually what am I most proud of is actually my teams and the teams that I work with, and it's the collective effort often. I mentioned that I need to take some time off work earlier in the discussion, and one of the proudest things actually has been knowing that an individual person, including myself, is not indispensable. Actually, when you have a team that really supports and works together and continues even in your absence, and I think that certainly recently has been a particularly insightful and eye-opening career high.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that collaboration pays off, doesn't it? If you invest in that, it really helps.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay. And have there been any career lows that you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, I think absolutely the case. I mean, there have been setbacks when there are things that I would have wanted to have done when I didn't do them certainly in the time frame that I would have wanted. There are also examples, I guess, of not being successful at competitive tenders in kind of my profession, where you would have wanted to work with a particular client, but for particular reasons where that's not been happened. And I guess particularly where I feel that I could have done something different in those situations. And there are certainly examples where, with one example, I typically competitive tenders can be quite procurement led, and so quite kind of paper based, drawn out in terms of kind of just the words and that sort of thing. And I mentioned earlier the humanity, and actually it's the relationships that often matter, and not forgetting aspect of it and investing in that. So that's certainly something I've learned from, is making sure that even in the most procurement-led element is not forgetting, I think, the human element and the fact that at the end of the day, it's people making decisions, and it's treating that with the appropriate respect as well.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So, any other career stages or choices you'd like to talk about?
I guess I've also had a brilliant opportunity at PwC to just have a huge variety of opportunities and things that I can do. I was saying to you earlier, every day is a different day here at PwC. I mean, I spent, even if I take this week as an example, earlier this week I was at a talk for a social mobility event, speaking with university students, not dissimilar to this, around career choices, tips and advice in terms of how to get into a job in the city, alongside somebody from a law firm and somebody from a real estate company. Yesterday, I was out at a client board meeting presenting around our audits. And then today, obviously very pleased to be doing this. And then later on, I'm heading off to the House of Lords for an event for a charity who's launching their strategy. So every day is different. And I think that's the beauty of the variety that my job brings. But I've also had the opportunity to work internationally as well, which has been really great. So I've had the opportunity to work in the US, in India. I did a 4-month secondment with PwC to the Middle East in Dubai. And that's all taught me a range of different things around understanding different cultures, different ways of doing things. And even where you might think things are relatively similar, there are nuances in place, which you just need to get used to and need to respect and recognize. And that's been fascinating. And that's a fantastic part of the job that I love as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It does sound really, really interesting. So we talked a little bit about this offline. So what do you think about the whole virtual office-based work? So I was saying that I was in London last week. It was really nice to see everything almost back to normal with, the streets all buzzing and all of that kind of thing. So what do you think about that when people are starting work, if they've got the choice of virtual or office-based work?
I mean, I think in the post-pandemic world, I think inevitably it's going to be a combination of both. But I do think there is a huge importance around office-based work and in-person work in particular. Certainly at PwC, we have emphasized the importance of that and from a very early stage, actually. And indeed, I've always, I guess, shared the importance, I guess, of learning from others in person rather than necessarily in kind of virtual. So PwC is a training firm. We hire over kind of many high apprentices, graduates, and new employees each year. And in terms of onboarding and training them, certainly I feel, and the feedback I get is they feel that kind of in person is much more effective around the coaching and the supervision of them as well. And one of the reasons for that is I think it's in addition to the formal coachings, the formal meetings, you also get to absorb the information that everybody else is doing and talking around you. It's almost that learning by osmosis effect that's really critical. But clearly there is a time and a place for virtual too, because that is what that sort of flexibility is sort of built in now post-pandemic, and I think we absolutely need to respect that. But it's getting that balance right. Another dimension of this is, I guess, the international travel that I mentioned. Many, or certainly some of the things that we used to need to or feel we needed to kind of travel to do, to meet, have been done quite successfully virtually. But the thing I would say is I think it's not having no travel, it's about being purposeful about the travel, making every interaction count. And that I think is key.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good. And so Jeff's saying he agrees totally. A job at a consulting firm is full of variety. So thank you, Jeff. Okay, so just go on to our last question now, which is about advice, really. So have you got some advice for people who want to kind of successfully get into a company like PwC? So whether it's an apprentice, a graduate, or a more mature candidate, obviously it's quite a competitive area. So what's the best way of getting in?
Yeah, I had a lot of reflection about this, and I guess the one biggest tip I would say, and certainly the thing that I have learned, is be yourself. Don't
Yeah.
try to be somebody else.
Mm.
Certainly at PwC, we're not looking for the perfect candidate. It doesn't exist. We're not looking for a PwC person. Again, that doesn't exist. We certainly, I want to be working with a diverse range of people who are themselves and who can contribute ideas from their own unique experiences, skill
Yeah.
sets, and to make a difference from that perspective. So I always used to think that actually we need to put this kind of professional shield up and avoid talking about anything that made you vulnerable, for example.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's really important for you not to hide yourself and to be your authentic self and share both your strengths, and everybody here will have their own individual strengths. That's really important, and you should absolutely play up, but also to recognize that everybody has areas for development and areas where they may not be as good as the next person. And I guess being very open and owning that, I think, can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Because none of us are perfect, and every one of us has got a way to go. And that for me is the biggest thing from that perspective. But also what I said earlier about following your passion. Do something you're interested in, do something you're curious about, do something that you feel you will find interesting. And at a firm like PwC, there are jobs and roles in a company as large as this that I've not even heard of, certainly didn't exist 5 years ago with the way technology is going. And so there are many opportunities. And if the first one that you find isn't the right one, or you're unsuccessful for whatever reason, don't be disheartened, because there's always other roles out there for you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think one final point, touching on what you said there about kind of skills. So I know there's quite a big move on LinkedIn for firms to go more down a skills-based recruitment rather than kind of just relying on education and degrees and things like that. Do you think that's something that PwC will be doing or have done?
Yep. So, I mean, recently, particularly in line with social mobility, we're no longer requiring particular grades at university, for example,
Right.
Which I think is a good step forward, absolutely, to widening the pool of talent that we as a firm can access. So skills-based is absolutely the way to go, and I don't think anybody's kind of background or history up to date should limit, I guess, the potential and the opportunities that they have access to, particularly where they're demonstrating they want to learn and they can be agile and have a skill set that's good for the future. And the jobs that will exist in 5-10 years time will not be the ones or the same ones that we do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think we could talk for ages, but I'm conscious of time. So thank you very much, Dan, for joining me today. I think it's been incredibly helpful. I'm sure lots of people are going to get lots out of this. So as always, if you're watching on Catch Up, then please do feel free to add some questions and I will come back and answer them as best I can. And for future shows, I've got people booked up till the end of July. Next week, I have Mark Crawley on. So Mark is founder of Diversita, who he works with neurodivergent professionals to help them find the right role with the right employer, and to make recruitment neurodiverse friendly. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. So thanks again, Dan, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.